This conference will now be recorded.
There we go.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending this evening's program. My name is Anna Vanscoik, and I am a reference librarian at the Hopewell branch for the Mercer County Library System. Before we get started tonight, I do want to share with you a couple programs that are going to be presented in the same format virtually through our GoToMeeting platform. April is Autism Acceptance Month, and tomorrow evening we have a program, Music Therapy and Neurodiversity, with a focus on autism spectrum disorder. And that is tomorrow evening, so April 19th at 7 o'clock. And then this week is actually also National Park Week, and also for Earth Day, we are having a program on Thursday, April 21st at 7 o'clock, Roosevelt's Tree Army, the history of the Civilian Conservation Corps. So it's going to talk about that aspect of Roosevelt's New Deal. And again, that is Thursday, April 21st at 7 o'clock. So now let's move on to this evening's program. I'm very much looking forward to our program tonight, Liberty Dawn, Troianis Paintings of the Revolutionary War, which is co-sponsored with the Hopewell Museum and the Hopewell Valley Historical Society. Those are two partnerships that the Friends of the Hopewell branch truly value, and they have proven to be a true asset to the entire Mercer County Library System with our virtual programming. And I'm lucky to have online with me tonight Bob Worsnack from the Hopewell Museum, and I believe Bob Lawless from the Hopewell Valley Historical Society will be joining us in a little bit as well. For this evening, we have Matthew Skic, who serves as the curator of exhibitions at the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. He is originally from Hopewell, New Jersey. He worked as a historical interpreter at Washington Crossing State Park during high school. Matthew went on to study history at American University and interned for the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. He was a fellow in the University of Delaware's Winter program in American Material Culture and graduated with his master's degree in 2016. Soon after graduation from the winter program, Matthew joined the curatorial team at the Museum of the American Revolution and helped open the museum in 2017. He has curated multiple award-winning exhibitions and online projects since then. He's very busy. Matthew has also authored or co-authored 3 books. Among his troops, Washington's War Tent in a Newly Discovered Watercolor. That was in 2019. And also in 2019, Cost of Revolution, The Life and Death of an Irish Soldier. And then most recently, Liberty Don Troiani's Paintings of the Revolutionary War, which was just published in 2021. So again, on behalf of the Hopewell Museum and the Hopewell Valley Historical Society and the Mercer County Library System, I welcome you to this evening's program, and I'm going to pass it off to you, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Anna. I appreciate that kind introduction, and I really appreciate being invited to speak to you all. And just as a note, tomorrow is the 5th anniversary of the opening of the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia, and it was a great honor to be part of the staff that helped open the museum. And for those of you that have been there, we thank you for visiting. I hope you enjoyed your experience. And then for those of you that have yet to visit, we look forward to seeing you soon. And I hope this presentation might encourage you to come see the museum. And so when and to start this presentation off, the question I want to pose to you and to keep in your mind as I'm speaking is, when you think about the Revolutionary War, what do you picture in your mind's eye? What images come to mind? What faces do you see? And I want to start by sharing one image that often comes to mind for me, and it's an image that many of you have spent a lot of time looking at. It's an image that is familiar to many Americans, and it's an image that I spoke a lot about when I was a historical interpreter at Washington Crossing State Park in Titusville. and that's Emanuel Leutz's painting of the crossing of the Delaware, Washington's crossing of the Delaware, the great, really iconic painting of one of the great moments of American history. It's a painting that when you go see it in person, it's really breathtaking. And this painting has been one of the most important paintings in my life. Not only did I speak about it as a interpreter at Washington Crossing Park, but when I first got to see it in person at the Metropolitan, I was just stunned about how large it is. And it's a painting that really helped me as a boy when I was a student in the schools of the Hopewell Valley School District. It was really encouraging me to expand my knowledge of American history and really encouraging me to learn more and more about the American Revolution. And while this painting is so iconic and such an important painting in American art history, it's also a painting that kind of suggests a kind of mythic quality to the American Revolution. And it's hard to imagine that an event like this actually took place. And so a lot of times this painting has been criticized for its inaccuracy or what it depicts. And really, this painting, when you look into the story of why it was created, it wasn't really about the accuracy of it. It was about conveying emotion and drama and the importance of Washington's daring crossing of the Delaware and that Christmas night crossing that led to the battles of Trenton the following day, the Battle of Trenton the following day, in which Washington wins a victory there, helping to save the Revolution from almost total defeat. This painting helps to convey the drama of that moment. But another question I'd like to pose to you is, what did the Revolutionary War truly look like? Maybe Emanuel Leutze got a few things right with that painting, but what did it actually look like when Washington crossed the Delaware? Well, there's been a lot of artists over the generations that have tried to tackle the question of what did the Revolutionary War truly look like. Unfortunately, we don't have photographs of the Revolutionary War, because it's before photography was invented, and very few eyewitness drawings, sketches, and paintings exist that show the events of this time period. There's very few eyewitness drawings of the Battle of Bunker Hill or the Siege of Yorktown, and oftentimes what does survive from participants and eyewitnesses is hard to understand and hard to see what is actually and understand what is going on. And then artists that lived through the Revolutionary War, but then started painting events during and after, oftentimes took a more dramatic, made a more dramatic scene and kind of twisted reality a little bit to make a point or to celebrate victories and heroes. And one artist that has spent his career trying to tackle the question of what did the Revolutionary War truly look like is an artist named Don Troiani, who's based in Southbury, Connecticut, and still painting today. I want to point out and start with one painting that has really captured my attention from his work, and it's a painting that shows a relatively little known moment of that took place just hours after Washington's famous crossing of the Delaware, and that's a moment that has been written about by historians, but is still forgotten by a lot of the general public. And that's not only did Washington's army cross the Delaware River on Christmas night, 1776, they also had to march right after that crossing about 9 miles to attack the town of Trenton. And in that difficult march through a nor'easter snowstorm, the 2,400 men, approximately 75 to 100 horses, about 18 cannons, had to trudge through the snow and mud and sleet. As one 15-year-old participant described it, the wind blew like a perfect hurricane. It was a great struggle. And then they went to go fight in the battle. And this painting by Don Troiani, called Victory or Death, Advance on Trenton, helps to convey the feeling and emotion of what it might have been like on that early morning of December 26th, 1776. And when you look closer at the painting, you see some figures that you'll recognize their names of. Captain Alexander Hamilton there who was just 19 years old at the time, and of course General George Washington is in this, but he's not in the center foreground. He's not the main subject of the painting, but rather you see him there with his reddish brown hair, resolute in his saddle, sword drawn, about to lead his army into battle in one of their first successes of the Revolutionary War. So this painting helps to convey in in some ways the reality of what went on in battle, while also conveying some of the emotion and hardship and triumphalness of this soon to be victorious army. But a little bit more about who Don Troiani is and how he came to tackle this question of what did the Revolutionary War truly look like. Here's Don in his studio in 2011 with one of his paintings on display on the easel, showing Revolutionary heroine Margaret Corbin when she was wounded at the Battle of Fort Washington in 1776. And Don Troiani has dedicated his nearly 50-year career to painting scenes from America's military history. His credo, his guiding force is that he feels that a painting can be both dramatic and accurate. And this standard has guided his work for more than 3 decades. Troiani is an artist who has spared no expense to kind of uncover as many details as he can about the battles and events of America's military history, and also the material culture of America's military history, meaning the uniforms that soldiers wore, the weapons that they carried, also the landscapes of America's military history, what the battlefields actually looked like back in 1776 or 1775. And Troiani's research, his study of America's military history is combined with his great artistic talent and skill, which he developed early on in his life when he was sketching in his notebooks in elementary school and high school. But then he was able to study at one of America's great art institutes, the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philadelphia, where he studied painting in the late 1960s, graduating in the early 1970s. And at PAFA, Don Troiani really honed his skills as a painter while also studying works by great artists and artists that were inspirational to him, such as Benjamin West and John Singleton Copley and John Trumbull. Some of these painters that are lived through the Revolutionary era were witness to some of the events that took place and really showcased their skills as some of the great painters of the era. Troiani was also inspired by later artists of the 19th century and early 20th century who painted military scenes, such as the French artist Edouard de Taille, who has really paid a lot of attention to France's military conflicts in the 19th century and studied uniforms, studied battlefields, and tried to convey accurate depictions of some of France's military events of the 19th century. Painters that Don Troiani studied are Howard Pyle, for example, whose famous painting of the Battle of Bunker Hill is seen here at the bottom of the screen, and Gilbert Gall, who also is a famous American military artist. But another painting that was inspirational to Don and an artist that was inspirational to Don Troiani is William Trego. And this is probably Trego's most famous work, the March to Valley Forge, showing Washington's army limping its way to its winter encampment at Valley Forge in 1777. And so Trego's painting, the original of which hangs at the Museum of the American Revolution as part of our collection, really is iconic in its own way and sharing what it might have been like there in 1777. So with all that in mind, as Don Troiani began his early career in the 1970s, he was painting when the bicentennial events of the Revolutionary War were just starting up. And one of the earliest contributions to the bicentennial celebrations was Troiani was hired by the National Park Service and the government printing office to create a poster or illustrations for a poster showing the story of the Continental Soldier. He also did a series of paintings that would be featured on newly installed signage at National Park Service battlefields, such as Yorktown Battlefield in Virginia. This poster of the Continental Soldier with artwork by Don Troiani hung over my bed when I was a little boy, and this was actually my first exposure to Don Troiani's paintings. So I still have the poster that I hung over my bed. Still have it in my collection, and I really treasure it. And so as Don was getting more and more renowned for his work, American Heritage Magazine commissioned works by him, and Don was painting soldiers and battle scenes such as the battle at Lexington Green on April 19th, 1775. You can see here in this painting. And the bicentennial really provided an opportunity and a lot of work for Don, especially early in his career, to really show off his talents, his skills. And he started to make quite a reputation for himself. So that by the time of the 1980s and the Civil War anniversaries that were coming up in the 1980s, Don Troiani focused a lot of attention on painting the Civil War. And really, that's where he became quite famous for his works. Don has painted hundreds and hundreds of Civil War paintings through his career, and it really launched his career in new and exciting ways. But he's also painted other periods, such as the War of 1812 and the French and Indian War. But even though he's painted the Civil War, the French and Indian War, the War of 1812, the Revolutionary War is still Don's favorite time period to paint. It's the era that has captured his imagination the most. It's his favorite to paint. And now that Don Troiani is later in his career, he's no longer painting the Civil War. He's chiefly focused on painting America's earlier military conflicts before 1812, primarily focusing on the era of the Revolutionary War. One of the things that's really set Don apart from other painters and really launched Don to be widely considered America's foremost living military artist is the fact that Don Troiani is a collector. His collection of Revolutionary War military antiques is world class. It's something that he has amassed throughout his career, and he has really become an expert on the material culture of the armies of the Revolutionary War. For example, the grenadier cap that you see on screen was worn by a British grenadier during the Revolutionary era, and it's a part of Don's collection. These caps are so iconic in ways. They symbolize the British Army of this period, and it's rare to have an original in a museum, but let alone have one in a private collection. Don Troiani collects everything from hats and caps to powder horns and muskets, belt buckles and buttons. He's even partnered with the historian James Cochin to write sort of the leading book on military buttons and belt plates and gorgets of the Revolutionary era called Insignia of Independence. His collection is routinely borrowed from by the Museum of the American Revolution and put on display at the museum. His collection is also has been a great resource for students of the Revolutionary era. It's rare that you get a chance to see a lot of this material in one place, let alone in a private collection. And Don Troiani often opens his doors to researchers and other collectors who want to study this period and the objects that are left behind by the participants. Don Troiani's collection and his paintings have been conveyed and shared with the public in many ways. They chiefly among them is they have appeared in numerous books authored by Troiani and other historians, depending on the era. His art has been featured in well over a dozen books published by Stackpole Books, which is the official publisher of Don Troiani's artwork. But his artwork has also been licensed in many different capacities, such as on National Park Service signage, as book covers for fellow historians, in textbooks, history textbooks. Don Troiani's paintings of soldiers and battles are often featured in those books that students are using in middle school and high school. And you can see when you look closely at Don Troiani's paintings, you can see why they're so people are so drawn to them. They really are focused on details, and they're almost photographic-like in quality. So, for example, here we see General George Washington in one of his most famous moments as commander-in-chief, leading a counterattack by the Continental Army at the Battle of Princeton. The Clark family farm is seen in the background on the right in the distance. You see men of the Philadelphia Associators on the left side of the painting, charging forward in this desperate attack. You see wounded men of the British 17th Regiment of Foot on the ground here. And when you zoom in and look closely at these paintings, you can see that Don Troiani has painted the little 17 on the buttons of the soldiers. You can see that he's painted a insignia on the drum of that drummer of the Philadelphia Associators there. You can even see almost the silky quality of the ribbon, blue silk ribbon across General Washington's chest there that marked him and distinguished him as the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. It's amazing to look at these details, and they also call attention to well-known stories and sometimes little-known stories, such as the woman that became known as Molly Pitcher. Her name was Mary Ludwig Hayes. The woman who was a camp follower with the Continental Army, whose husband was an artilleryman from Pennsylvania. And when he fell at the Battle of Monmouth, Mary took his place at the cannon and tended to the gun, leading one soldier, Joseph Plum Martin, who was there at the battle, to remark later in his memoir that he remembered seeing a woman tend to one of the guns in the Battle of Monmouth, and he remembered seeing a cannonball pass through her legs, carrying off the lower portion of her petticoat. Luckily, it didn't carry her away with it, is what he said. But Molly, the woman that becomes known as Molly Pitcher, was a real individual, Mary Ludwig Hayes, who lived well after the Revolutionary War, earned a pension for her military service. But Don Troiani shows her in action here in this painting of the Battle of Monmouth. And as I said, Don Troiani's paintings call attention to little-known stories as well. So, for example, you see here his painting of the Battle of Oriskany, specifically focusing on the story of the bravery of two members of the Oneida Indian Nation, just to the left of the center there, Hanule Duckstader and his wife, Two Kettles Together, who Duckstader was a Oneida war captain, and he and his wife fought together at the Battle of Oriskany in the woods of the Mohawk River Valley. And this is one of the first times that the Haudenosaunee, what we call the Iroquois Confederacy, was broken in two after hundreds of years of an alliance between the nations, such as the Mohawk, the Seneca, the Cayuga, the Oneida, where they had joined together in this alliance, but the Revolutionary War tears it apart. When the Oneida and the Tuscarora decide to side with the United States, and the Mohawk, the Seneca, the Cayuga, they decide to side with the British. And so in this battle at Oriskany, this is one of the first times that the Oneida are battling with their fellow Haudenosaunee people in this vicious fight that takes place in the woods of the Mohawk River Valley. The battle itself was pitting New York militiamen and their Native American allies against Loyalist troops, Hessian troops, and their Native American allies. Both sides declared victory in this battle, although it was largely a bloody draw. But Don Troiani's painting calls attention to it. And this painting was actually commissioned by the Oneida Indian Nation to commemorate their participation in this battle and commemorate the fact that they were one of the first allies of the newly declared United States. One of Don Troiani's more recent paintings is shown here. That his take on the surrender, the British surrender at Yorktown on October 19, 1781, showing the men of the Royal Welsh Fusiliers marching to surrender their muskets and lay down their arms as a vanquished foe in this grand siege put on by General Washington's army and the French allies under the command of General Rochambeau. Of course, this wasn't the last battle of the Revolutionary War. The war would go on for 2 more years, but it was the last great, large battle of the Revolutionary War and Washington's greatest victory as commander-in-chief. These large paintings that you've seen are all oil on canvas works measuring 4, 5, 6 feet wide. But Don Troiani has also done a lot of, and by a lot I mean hundreds and hundreds of single soldier studies and single figure studies of the participants of the Revolutionary War, giving viewers a sense of the cross-section and diversity of the participants of the Revolutionary War, the people that actually fought in these battles and marched the hard marches and were in the camps of the Revolutionary armies. And so the 3 I have shown here are all watercolor and gouache on board paintings by Troiani. They give a little bit of a softer tone, but they still are really dedicated to details. You see here French soldiers, French grenadiers specifically, during the siege of Yorktown on the left, a soldier of African descent here, a member of Virginia Royal Governor Lord Dunmore's named Ethiopian Regiment. Although these men were likely not from Ethiopia, Dunmore used this term Ethiopia as a term to refer to people of African descent, men of African descent that joined his cause in fighting against rebellious colonists in Virginia. Some of these men of Dunmore's Ethiopian regiment were given cast-off British coats, and you can see that is recreated here in Don's painting. On the right of your screen is a German woman, unnamed, but from the Principality of Brunswick, who was a camp follower in British General John Burgoyne's army during the Great Saratoga Campaign of 1777. And one of the amazing things about Don's paintings is they can bring what only exists as a written description in a primary source and bring it to life in full color. And this painting of this camp follower and her young daughter is based on a woman named Hannah Winthrop, who was a Bostonian who witnessed the surrendered army of General John Burgoyne. And she wrote about it in a letter to one of her friends, saying how she remembered seeing the German women that were with the British army. She called them beasts of burden because they were carrying so much on their back in their packs. And she remembered seeing infants peeping out of those baskets and packs, and the women who smoked pipes and were not wearing shoes. She didn't, as a very genteel woman in Boston, she was almost looking down upon them, but was also astonished that they could withstand this march and this difficult experience of campaigning with an army. So as you saw earlier, Don Troiani's early career and his works have quite a bit of a different appearance with his more recent paintings. So here on screen, I just show you one example of Don Troiani's early work of the battle at Lexington Green on April 19, 1775, and another of his paintings showing the same moment, just at a same event, just a different moment within that event. You can see how Don has become a little bit more refined in his work, a little bit more detail-oriented, a little bit more photographic-like in quality. You can also see that a bit in his single soldier studies. So an example of an early one from the early 70s on the left, and a more recent one from the 2000s on the right, of showing a British soldier. A little bit more cartoonish on the left, but a lot more detail-oriented on the right. And so before any brush is put to canvas, Don Troiani engages in a lot of secondary research. So that involves reading the works of historians and understanding these events that he's going to paint. He also engages in field study, going to Lexington and Concord and studying the topography of the area, comparing it with historic maps, and trying to understand the trees that were there in 1775, understanding how modern battlefields might have invasive species on them today. So making sure that he's not painting them into the work. He's taking a lot of photographs, for example. His primary research involves studying historic documents, such as newspapers and letters, but also archaeology, studying battlefield artifacts such as musket balls and buttons and other things that were recovered from the battlefield, to understand where soldiers were when they were in different parts of the battle. Objects that were not recovered from the ground, that have been passed down through families, and that some of which are part of his collection or in museums collections, are so important to Don's work that, when he's painting a British Grenadier, he can take the British Grenadier cap in his collection and sit it right next to him while he's painting, and study its details, and make sure he's getting those details right in the painting of that Grenadier. He's also studying historical images and those eyewitness images of the Revolutionary War that can inform his work, that help him understand. And I'm going to go through some examples of those. And one of the things he also does is he hires models to pose for him in photo shoots. And so I'll go through a little example of each of these techniques to show you how Don is using these. So using these techniques in his work. So on the left, for example, is a photograph that Don Troiani took at the modern reconstruction of the North Bridge at Concord. And you can see that he is looking across the bridge with this photograph, and then on the right is his painting of the action on April 19, 1775, showing the perspective of that he took the photograph of, but now he's transforming that into a painting, adding in the figures of the Acton Minute Company here engaged in the battle. Here's one example of how he's using an artifact in a painting. So this is an artifact that's in his collection. This is a gorget, or ornamental insignia of rank worn by a German officer from Brunswick, that German principality. This is a gorget that would have been worn around the neck of that officer as a sign of his rank and position in the army. The gorget is silver and gold with an enameled centerpiece, and you can see in Don Troiani's painting of the Battle of Bennington, showing the Brunswick dragoons in this fateful attack in which they would be soundly defeated. You can see that the officer Friedrich Baum, who was killed that day, is wearing this gorget that Don has in his collection. Even though it's not the gorget that Baum actually wore that day, it's something that he likely would have worn at that battle. Here is an eyewitness sketch of a Native American soldier that participated and supported the Continental Army. This is a Stockbridge Indian, a member of the Stockbridge Native American community of Massachusetts. And this is a sketch that was actually done by a Hessian officer named Johann Ewald, who was there at a battle that the Stockbridge Indians participated in. Ewald, in his journal, did this sketch, but without understanding the historical context of this image, it's pretty hard to understand what is actually happening. when you read the German description that Ewald left of the battle and of his sketch, you begin to understand what he was seeing in the battlefield. He actually came upon the battlefield in which a number of wounded and dead Stockbridge Indians were lying after this dreadful battle that they participated in, were defeated by a combined force of British and Loyalist troops. And so taking and studying this eyewitness image, the only known eyewitness image of a Native American ally of the United States, from the Revolutionary War, Don Troiani takes the details seen in that and can recreate, based on his study of the battle and this image and descriptions of it, recreate what the battle might have looked like in 1778. This is a battle that's known as the Battle of King's Bridge, that took place in what is today the Bronx in New York, part of New York City. And you can still visit today a park in the Bronx, right near the border of Westchester County. And part of the park is known as Indian Field to this very day. And there's a small monument there. And that monument is commemorating the Stockbridge Indians who lost their lives fighting for the United States. And here is the first ever full-scale painting of what that battle might have looked like. So he's bringing attention to a little-known moment of the Revolutionary War and the diversity of the participants of war. As I mentioned, Don hires a lot of models and does photo shoots with models. And to accomplish that, he has amassed over his decades-long career a humongous wardrobe and sort of Hollywood prop style collection of reproduction muskets and swords and uniforms and cartridge boxes and bayonets, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see this is a snapshot into that wardrobe room at Don Troiani's studio. So I personally have modeled for some of Don's paintings. So I've put on some of his clothing and gone out in Don's backyard. He's taken photos, and that is turned into a painting. So it's really neat to be part of the process. And you can see in this image here of a lot of hats and caps in his collection. Don Troiani's working with some of the great craftsmen and women who recreate the material culture of the Revolutionary War or the Civil War with no detail left behind. And so Don Troiani uses these reproductions in his work quite frequently. And you can see here's a model participating in a photo shoot dressed as a Hessian soldier in a rocky area in Connecticut, trying to mimic the rocky topography of Manhattan for Don Troiani's paintings of the attack on Fort Washington in 1776. One of the interesting projects that the museum was able to participate in was to commission a work by Don Troiani. And the work we commissioned was commissioned at a time when we were thinking about an exhibit showing Don Troiani's work. Now, prior to the opening of an exhibit of Don Troiani's work at the Museum of the American Revolution in October of 2021, Don Troiani had never exhibited his original works before to the public. And that's because when Don Troiani paints a painting, when he's finished with it, it's up for sale. And oftentimes people, private collectors, buy them, or sometimes one or two museums might buy paintings. But that means since they end up largely in private collections, very few people get a chance to see them. So we at the museum had the idea to create an exhibit showing Don Troiani's work and showing off some of his collection. And we thought it'd be a great idea to also commission a work by Troiani to show another little-known moment of the Revolutionary War. And this is a moment that actually took place just outside of where the Museum of the American Revolution is today, on Chestnut Street in Philadelphia. It's a moment that took place on September 2nd, 1781, when a young man named James Fortin, who was just 15 years old at the time, was there when General Washington's army marched through Philadelphia on their way to Yorktown, on the way to Virginia to the eventual victory at Yorktown in October of 1781. And at that moment, the 15-year-old Fortin remembered seeing the soldiers of the army, and he specifically remembered seeing soldiers of African and Native American descent in some of the New England regiments that marched through the city. And later in life, James Fortin would rise to become a business owner in Philadelphia. He owned a successful sailmaking business and accumulated quite a bit of wealth for a free person of African descent in the early 19th century. And he became a leader in advocating for the end of slavery. He was a leading abolitionist and befriended another abolitionist, William Lloyd Garrison. And they struck up a correspondence. And James Fortin even led to James Fortin even being a sponsor of William Lloyd Garrison's newspaper, The Liberator, which was an abolitionist paper. And in one letter that James Fortin wrote to William Lloyd Garrison, he was reflecting upon the United States and the situation of the United States in the 1830s. And he recalled this moment of seeing soldiers of African and Native American descent in Washington's army. He was writing a letter about how he was very much against colonization, which was the effort to send African Americans to Africa and settle there in Liberia and Sierra Leone, removing them from the United States and sending them to Africa. And Fortin was very much against this because he said that soldiers of color had fought for the independence of the United States. They had fought to create the United States. James Fortin himself had served aboard a privateer ship out of Philadelphia during the Revolutionary War. So why should the men and the descendants of those men that fought in the Revolutionary War be effectively deported? This is a country that they fought to create. He called these men as brave men as ever fought. So this moment, this memory really stuck with James Fortin. This moment of seeing soldiers of African and Native American descent in the army really stuck with him and really was a moment that he used time and time again to show that African Americans deserve citizenship. They deserve to be members of the United States. And in commissioning this work, a painting that would recreate this moment, we got to work with Don Troiani and get a sense of his process. Here you can see his paint palette that he used while painting this painting that we commissioned. One of the models that was used to show a member of the Rhode Island Regiment, which was one of those New England regiments that Fortin saw. The Rhode Island Regiment included 2 full companies of soldiers, private soldiers, African Americans and Native Americans in the ranks. And as the painting started to come into light, Don Troiani was sending us progress shots to show it in different stages, from the initial sketches to this painting showing a brown wash over the scene. And then here we see the original work, the finished product, Brave Men As Ever Fought, taking the words of James Fortin, showing him there as a 15-year-old in the center in the brown coat, holding his hat at his chest, seeing one of those full companies of soldiers of color of the Rhode Island Regiment marching down Chestnut Street in Philadelphia with the facade of Independence Hall in the background. So this painting is now on display at the Museum of the American Revolution in the exhibit. Along with the brand new painting that Don Troiani did, over 40 of Troiani's original works are on display in this exhibit, alongside artifacts from his collection, a sampling of which you see here that are on display. The exhibit opened in October, so you can see 46 original works, these objects as well. The panels, text panels in the exhibit take you through the chronology of the Revolutionary War, but also some of the panels sort of pull back the curtain on Don Troiani's process and how he creates these paintings, focusing on some of the techniques that he uses to create these works that I spoke about earlier. And I hope you get a chance to come see this exhibit in person, because it's, like I said, it's the first time that Don Troiani's original works are on public view. But the exhibit itself was also, we also commissioned full 360-degree photography of the exhibit. So from the comfort of your own home at your own computer, uh, freely accessible, you can access and explore the exhibit using that 360-degree photography. And I've put a URL directly to that virtual tour of the exhibit on the screen here. So I encourage you to check that out if you can't visit in person. But if you can visit in person, you can even share it with your friends and say, hey, I saw this exhibit and I thought you might like it too. It's a great way to share this exhibit. And with this increasingly emphasis on virtual offerings due to the COVID-19 pandemic and over these past 2 years, this virtual tour allows us a way for this exhibit to live on and connect with more people around the country and even around the world. So along with the exhibit, we also published a book with Stackpole Books, Don Troiani's publisher, that includes all of the paintings in the exhibit, the artifacts that are featured, and I worked with a few other historians and served as the principal author of this catalog. So I'm very pleased that we're able to offer it. It's available through the museum's gift shop, both in person and through our online shop. So I encourage you to check it out. And if you're interested in learning more about Don Troiani's art and even maybe acquiring a piece of art for your own collection, Don Troiani's artworks are also available in print format. So you can buy prints of his soldier studies and paintings from the licensed retailer of Don Troiani's work, W. Britton. One of the offerings that W. Britton also has are miniature figures, and you can see an example of a Rhode Island soldier on the right there. They're about 3 inches tall, but they're based on figures from Don Troiani's paintings. So they're professionally created to recreate Don Troiani's works in a fun 3-dimensional form. And so, as I said, I encourage you to visit the museum, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have about Troiani's art, about the exhibit, or about the Museum of the American Revolution. So I'll stop sharing and answer any questions you have.
Matthew, thank you so much. I have to tell you that just an amazing presentation. And I think part of it is just that you can tell your respect and your enthusiasm for the artist. It just comes out when you present. So thank you for such an
Thank you.
amazing presentation. I really love it. I do. Well, first of all, before I hog the whole thing, I do want to invite our participants to ask any questions that they have for Matthew. You can use the chat box that is in the top right-hand corner of your screen, and you can enter those in there, and I will pose the question for Matthew to answer for everybody. But I think one of the things that I really love that you talked about in the beginning was his blend of authenticity with drama and how that can be successful. And it's so obvious in his paintings and the images that you showed us today. I mean, just the detail, as you were saying, the numbers on the buttons for the 17th Regiment. I mean, that's just amazing. And you also talked about Lutz's painting, the Washington Crossing, the Delaware, which is a pretty awesome piece of work. The pieces that you have of Troianis at the museum right now, are they comparable in size? Are they about the same size, smaller, bigger, a variety?
Good question. Yeah. So the Leutze painting at the Metropolitan Museum of Art is truly gigantic. It's mammoth.
Yeah.
I forget exactly how wide it is, but it's probably 15 feet wide. Whereas most of Don Troiani's oil on canvas paintings, those which are chiefly battle scenes, those are 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 feet wide. The largest example that we have on display is actually the Battle of Oriskany painting. That's on loan from the Oneida Indian Nation,
Yes.
and that is about 6 feet wide.
That's probably one of the images that you showed this evening that I was most impressed with. It does have this photographic quality to it. I mean, you wouldn't, yeah, I gotta go see him.
Yeah,
That's all there
please
is.
do, please do.
That's all there
It's
is to it.
yeah, having
So
having studied so much of Don's works in books for many years, and then having to see the original in person, it's unlike seeing in a photograph. You gotta come see the real deal.
absolutely. So I do have a few questions if you have some
Sure.
time here. Has Troiani been in to the exhibit at the Museum of the American Revolution while the public is present?
He sure has, yes. He was there for all of the opening events for the exhibit. He not only did we have this sort of VIP reception for the opening, but we also had openings for our members and the general public. And Troiani was there to sign books, prints, greet people. He's very modest. He's very kind of quiet. Um, Don's in his 70s now, and but he's still painting. He's probably painting right now, and the people really enjoyed meeting him in person. On June 28th at the museum, Don will be back for an evening event, and so he'll be doing a book signing, a tour of the exhibit, and then talking about his career and process with our president and CEO, Scott Stevenson.
So that's June 28th, right?
June 28th, so mark
Okay.
that down.
So some comment here, fascinated by the artist's attention to detail of plant life, reconsidering what plant species were present in the historic landscape that may or may not survive today. I agree, just amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a great question. What is your favorite painting in the exhibit and why?
Right. So my favorite is one I showed as the first painting I showed. It's Victory or Death Advance on Trenton, because of where I grew up. Growing up in Hopewell Township, this Washington's Army crossed the Delaware and marched right through what is today Hopewell Township, back in 1776. And I think that painting, not only because of its local connection for me and for many of you tonight, um, the the grit that comes across in that
Mhm.
painting, um, the it always makes me think of a quote, a segment of a letter by Henry Knox that he wrote to his wife, Lucy. And he said that, reflecting upon the march to Trenton and the crossing and the battles, he wrote that perseverance accomplished what at first seemed impossible. And I think that is conveyed in that painting. That perseverance is coming across even through hardship, even through the unexpected turns that event took, with the storm that blew in, the difficulty of the crossing and the march. Um, Perseverance allowed the army to be victorious that day.
And then I have this is a multi-part. One of the questions is the presentation being recorded, and when and where will we view it? And yes, it is being recorded, and we will push a link out when it is ready to be viewed, through the email addresses that people used when they registered. So Matthew kindly agreed to let us record that this evening. And then I have a question, how long has Troiani been doing Revolutionary War images? And he used to focus on, and you talked about this a little bit. He used to focus on the American Civil War, and that's a question because he did do some of the American Civil War, but then he started to focus on the Revolutionary War.
Right, right, yeah. So yeah, Don Troiani is probably most famous for his Civil War paintings. That just because of the popularity of the studying of the Civil War,
Yeah.
and he was doing a lot of paintings when the Ken Burns PBS miniseries came out, really riding that wave quite a bit. He's Don Troiani has been very commercially successful with his Civil War paintings, but he's also been commercially successful with his Revolutionary War paintings, just not to the same scale. But Troiani's career throughout has featured his uh, interest in the Revolutionary War. So from when he was finishing up at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts to the present day, he has continuously been painting the Revolutionary War, whether it was on commission from American Heritage or the National Park Service, or from private commissions. Um, And today he is, as I said earlier, he's chiefly painting that time period. He's no longer painting the Civil War. He actually sold his Civil War collection of artifacts to the United States Army, but he still has his Revolutionary War collection. So he's all in on the Revolutionary War now, and that's really exciting. Not only do we have his 40 years of work on the Revolutionary War, but we're looking forward to see what's coming because we're just literally almost a stone's throw away from the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And as more and more people are thinking about the revolution, especially because of those anniversaries, we really hope that this exhibit and Don's works can help people grasp them, not only the momentous aspects of the Revolutionary War, but also the personal aspects of the war, understanding it on the ground from the perspectives of the participants. And I think Don Troiani's paintings get you a little bit more intimate into some of these events that when we read about them in the history books, we sometimes say, wow, these are hard to fathom that this actually happened. These people are real. But I hope Don's paintings convey that reality.
And does he have if you know, does he have anybody who's studying under him, like a protege or someone that he's kind of
Great question.
to pass this knowledge on so it can continue? Because I'm sure there's still just much to research and to paint and display for the public.
That's a great question. And that's something I've never asked Don himself, but I know he doesn't have any formal protege that's studying under him. But there have been a number of younger artists that have come up that would no doubt are inspired by Don Troiani's work. But I'm not sure if he's ever had any sort of formal relationship with them in terms of training or sharing techniques and ideas, bouncing ideas off each other, that sort of thing. But I'm going to bring that to Don's attention next time I talk with him and share that question.
And before I let you go, can you remind us how much longer the exhibit will be at the museum? I know I sent a link out for the virtual one. I pushed the link out to the participants so they could see the virtual tour that you were talking about, but how long will the actual exhibit be going on?
The exhibit will be on until Labor Day, so September 5th, 2022. So definitely get a chance to see it maybe sometime this summer when you're down in Philadelphia. July 4th is always a great time to visit, but we'll be busy, so get your tickets early. But we hope to see many of you at the museum before September. And like I said, if you can't make it, the virtual tour is there for you.
Well, again, I do want to thank you so much for such an informative and enthusiastic talk. And I do want to thank the Hopewell Museum as well as the Hopewell Valley Historical Society for helping bring this to the virtual format to share with everybody. Matthew, thank you. It's just been amazingly informative, and your images that you shared are just striking.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I hope that everybody has a great rest of the week.
Thank you so much. And Kim, thank you for your help behind the scenes. And everybody have a good evening, and I hope to see you at future events. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Thank you again.